Okay, please help me welcome Nicole Wilkins as our trainer today.
Good morning. Hello. Hi. How is everyone doing? First, happy Pride to everyone because it is still June and this is an LGBTQ training. So happy Pride to everyone. If everyone can put in the chat their name and their position and where they are currently working from, pretty much, what agency you're coming from. I would definitely appreciate that. I appreciate all of you all for coming to hear me chat for a little bit. Um, so we are going to get started. I'm going to share my screen if I know how. Yep. Yep. I got this, y'all. There we go. All right. All right. Here we go. So, of course, this is the LGBTQ plus cultural competency training. And the quote that I have here is just a quote that I saw one day and it really stood out to me. And I thought the quote was very important. So it says, LGBTQ plus individuals live in a heterosexual and cisgender society where they face the challenge of developing a healthy self-identity in the midst of societal norms that view their sexual orientation or gender as abnormal. So that kind of puts things into perspective about, in one simple little quote, about some of the things that members of the LGBTQ plus community deal with on a day-to-day basis. So before we get started on the actual training, I do want us to do just a progressive muscle relaxation exercise. We're not going to go through the whole entire exercise because, as you know, it could take a lot. So we're just going to do it together really quickly. So if everyone can sit comfortably in their chairs, as comfortable as you are. And I want everyone to, if you're comfortable, close your eyes for me. And then we're going to begin. So I would like for everyone to just take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. And I want you to hold that breath for me for just a few minutes, a few seconds. And I want you to release that breath out through your mouth, paying attention to how your body falls as you release that breath. And we're going to do that again together. I want you to take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. And I want you to hold that breath for me. And now I want you to release that breath slowly, allowing your body to fall to a point of relaxation. And now we're going to focus our attention on our feet. So I want you to ball your feet up as tight as you can without strain. So curl those toes. And then I also want you to bring some tension to your calf muscles and your thighs all at the same time. So your entire leg. And I want you to hold that tension for me. And then I would like for you to release that tension slowly. Bring your legs and your feet back to a point of relaxation. And now I want you to tense up the entire upper half of your body. So I want you to bring your shoulders up and back. Bring some tension to your back. And I want you to hold that tension there for me. Just hold it for a few seconds. And now I want you to release that tension slowly. Allow your body to fall back to a natural state of relaxation. And when you're ready, I would like for you to open your eyes up naturally. All right. So, of course, many of us are mental health professionals. So some of us are clinicians, some of us are case managers, some of us may be psychiatrists. Whatever you do, that is a technique that clinicians utilize in session for clients that are that may be struggling with anxiety during the session, that may have trouble with panic attacks. And so that is a technique that I use often with a lot of my clients to bring them to a point of relaxation in their body. And it's a technique that they can utilize outside of session as well. So I wanted to start with that today so that we can all just relax and be calm and ready, mostly for myself, okay? All right. What does the LGBTQ acronym stand for? So L is for lesbian, a woman that is attracted to other women. G, gay, someone who is attracted to those of their same gender. This is often used as the umbrella term, but it's specifically used to describe men who are attracted to men. Some of you all may know a lot back in the earlier days, I'll say it that way. Gay was just the umbrella term to identify anybody that was attracted to those of the same gender. B is for bisexual, an individual that is attracted to others of both sexes, male and female. The T stands for transgender, and an individual whose gender identity differs from the one they were assigned at birth. And Q stands for queer or questioning. In a very basic sense, anyone who is not heterosexual and or cisgender. In the past, queer was a negative or pejorative term for people who are gay, and thus it is sometimes disliked. I won't say sometimes, it is a disliked term most of the time, but the term is increasingly being used to describe all identities and politics that go against normative beliefs. So basically, queer is someone that identifies as queer can be someone that feels that they are outside of societal norms. And then the plus are additional add-ons to the LGBTQ plus community, like pansexual, asexual. So that's where the plus comes in. So some of the mental health challenges that are common for individuals who identify as the LGBTQ plus community. So that it's broken down into categories. The first category is stigma and discrimination, workplace discrimination, healthcare discrimination, social exclusion. The next category is identity and acceptance. And so the coming out process, it's very difficult, internalized stigma, gender dysphoria. And then the next one is violence and trauma, bullying, intimate partner violence, homelessness, and then some of the other that didn't necessarily fit into these categories, substance abuse, barriers to care, and minority stress. So with these different categories broken down, all of these things are the most common mental health challenges that individuals of the LGBTQ plus community struggle with. And so workplace discrimination, oftentimes if you have someone that is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, they don't want to let their coworkers or their colleagues know that they are a member of the LGBTQ plus community just because of possible discrimination. You never know who is an ally, who doesn't necessarily agree with your sexual orientation. And so they shun away from saying that or disclosing that about themselves. Healthcare discrimination. I don't know about you all, but I've had many clients in therapy that have come to me and said, oh, my last therapist, they treated me bad once they found out that I was gay or that I was a lesbian or that I was bisexual or that I identified as transgender. And they used that against me in some of my therapy sessions, or they took the side of my family who didn't agree with my choices. Another healthcare discrimination would be they have experienced having to switch care providers because that medical provider, let me say it that way, disagrees with their sexual orientation or their life choices. And so they say, nope, I don't want to be your provider. I don't want to be your doctor. I'm going to refer you out. And then social exclusion is a big one as well. They are oftentimes excluded from some social activities or events if someone knows, or they may be looked at if they're with their partner. The coming out process is difficult for many members of the LGBTQ plus community because it is daunting for them to say, you know what, I want to tell my family or my friends or my close loved ones about this, but I don't know how they're going to react. So I'm going to hold it in until maybe I'm a certain age. And then internalized stigma is a huge one as well. Members of the LGBTQ plus community, they really do struggle with internalizations about the stigma. And so they will begin to dislike themselves or struggle with low self-worth because they're listening to and they're internalizing a lot of the societal things that they hear about their particular community. And then gender dysphoria, they often members of the LGBTQ plus community, they struggle with gender dysphoria because they're like, I know that I was born female and I enjoy being a female, but there are parts of me that are masculine and I want to embrace my masculinity as well. And so I oftentimes have clients that struggle with that. And I say, well, have you ever heard of the term androgynous? And so that's where you can fluctuate. If you don't identify as transgender, but you also want to embrace your femininity and your masculinity, that there's another term called androgyny. Bullying, we all know about bullying within the LGBTQ plus community. There are many nonprofit foundations that have been founded because of bullying and people that have lost their lives, either their lives were taken or they took their own lives because of the excessive amount of bullying. Intimate partner violence is a huge thing within the LGBTQ plus community because they're partners of the same sex. And so, I can hit you because you're a female like me, or I can fight you because you're a male like me. So we can tussle it out. And that's not necessarily how any type of relationship should work. Homelessness is a huge one as well. So let's get into some of the statistics within the LGBTQ plus community. Only 25% of Virginia facilities have LGBTQ directed services. Only 25%. So what I would like for you all to do is I want you to put down in the chat for me if your facility is or your agency is a part of this 25% that have LGBTQ directed services. So, sorry. So a lot of the stats that I got were based within the last 5 years. A lot of the statistics were from the last 5 years. So a higher share of LGBT plus people reported needing mental health services in the last 2 years, and that's more than non-LGBTQ plus people. So 67% of LGBTQ plus people reported needing mental health services, whether it's therapy or whether it's substance abuse therapy, whether it's psychiatry. And that is a big jump from non-LGBTQ plus individuals. However, among those who needed care, 3/4 of those individuals with Medicaid sought mental health care. And remember in the last slide, I talked about how, there is healthcare discrimination. And so oftentimes members of the LGBTQ plus community, they know they need that mental health care, but they're afraid to receive it because again, they don't know who is accepting of their sexual orientation, of their gender identity. And so 65% sought care, and it even broke it down into age groups. So 65% of individuals between the ages of 18 and 25 sought care. 66% of individuals between the ages of 26 and 34. And then it got lower when it came to individuals between the ages of 35 and 64, but not too much lower. LGBTQ people were more likely to report a range of negative provider experiences in the past 2 years compared to non-LGBTQ plus people. And I want you to really let that resonate because that is a huge deal. So let's look at some of these stats right here. So, and they even broke it down into categories as well. So some of the negative experiences were they dismissed their concerns, excuse me. They assumed something about that individual without asking. They didn't believe that you were telling the truth. And they suggested you were personally to blame for a health problem that you were experiencing. You experienced discrimination at healthcare visits or any of these things. So I want you to, excuse me, look at the discrepancies between LGBTQ plus people and individuals who do not identify as LGBTQ plus. Excuse me. So let's talk about some of the suicide risks. And this particular slide and the stats that I got from this one were specifically for the state of Virginia and for youth. So 43% of LGBTQ youth in Virginia seriously considered suicide in the past year. That included 53% of transgender and non-binary youth. 13% of those youth attempted suicide, and that includes 17% of transgender and non-binary youth. 72% of those youth reported experiencing symptoms of anxiety, and 54% reported experiencing symptoms of depression. But I want us to really pay attention to the larger numbers for the transgender and non-binary youth, where out of the 43% of those youth, 53% were transgender and non-binary, and they considered suicide. So this one was about LGBTQ youth who wanted mental health care but were unable to get it and these were the top 5 reasons. I didn't want to have to get my parents or caregivers permission. I was afraid to ask. I was afraid I wouldn't be taken seriously. I couldn't afford it. And I was not out about being a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so 48% of those youth said, you know what, even though I need mental health care, I'm afraid to ask my parents for the permission to receive it. And oftentimes that's because maybe, you know what, my parents are going to say, no, you don't need that therapy. This is just a phase that you're going through. Another reason, I was afraid to talk about my mental health concerns with someone else. I was afraid that I wouldn't be taken seriously. I've had many youth in therapy that was one of their largest concerns. My mom always says, "You're not depressed. You okay?" Or "You'll get over it." Or "This is just a teenage phase of yours." And so imagine how invalidating that can be. And oftentimes parents are not intentionally invalidating their children's mental health concerns, or when they express themselves, but it is an invalidation nonetheless. I couldn't afford it. Maybe they had private insurance or no insurance at all, and they knew the cost that it would be. And I wasn't out. They hadn't come out to their family yet. And so if I ask for mental health care, my parents are going to ask me why I need it. And then they're going to ask me why I'm depressed. And then I will have to come out to them. And I'm not ready to come out to them just yet. So this was the breakdown of those statistics from the past 2 slides. So it was 63% of those individuals that participated in that survey were between the ages of 13 and 17, and 37% were between the ages of 18 to 24. And then it also broke down the race and ethnicity of those particular youth. So only 7% were Asian American or Pacific Islanders, 11% were African American, 9% was Latinx, 1% was Native American or Indigenous. 1% was Middle Eastern. 54% were Caucasian. And then more than 17% of them identified as more than one race or ethnicity. And then they also broke it down between gender identities. So 29% identified as girl or woman. 25% identified as boy or man, 36% identified as non-binary, bi gender, gender fluid or gender queer. And then 10% were not sure how they identified as far as their gender was concerned. And then they also broke it down again into the sexual orientation. So breaking down that acronym again, 1% identified as straight, 27% identified as gay or lesbian, 34% identified as bisexual, 8% identified as queer, 19% identified as pansexual, 9% identified as asexual, and 2% identified as questioning. So I want to go through this scenario really quickly before we really get into the meat of cultural competent care. And when we go through this, I want you to, after I read the scenario, I want you to type in the chat how you would treat this particular individual. So Lucas is a 29-year-old Hispanic transgender male. He has sought outpatient therapy services after coming out to his family as transgender. So Lucas was assigned female at birth, however, identifies as male. So Lucas is a transgender male. Lucas reports that his parents are accepting of him. However, they refuse to call him by his chosen name, Lucas. Instead, they continue to dead name him by using the name he was given at birth. During a recent session, he asked his therapist for help communicating his feelings to his parents about them dead naming him. If you were his therapist or you were his case manager or you were a part of his care team, how would you respond to Lucas? So I want you to type in the chat some ways that you would respond to Lucas or help Lucas learn how to communicate himself to his family. And then Karen, Duncan, I'm going to ask you to just unmute and just give me some of the answers that people have said in the chat, if you don't mind.
Validation, excuse me, I statements, role playing, having a family meeting,
Mhm.
I would relate to the family that is appreciative and thankful to have their acceptance. Having acceptance also consists of them using his chosen name. And that's what we have so far.
Okay, okay. I
Ask
like.
the family. I'm sorry, they're coming in slowly.
Oh,
um, support groups if available. Ask if family members can join the session. Listen, validate, and encourage him to continue to work with his loved ones. Normalize his experience, family therapy, empty chair, letter writing.
okay. Those are all some really good answers as to how you would help him communicate with his family. And I like that a lot of you are validating his experience with his family instead of not listening to him, but also thinking of ways to incorporate the family into the session with his given permission, with Lucas's given permission. So, what is cultural competency? Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of our training for today. So, according to Rice and Harris, cultural competency is defined as a set of interpersonal skills that allow behavioral health professionals to understand and appreciate individuals of different backgrounds and provide culturally appropriate services to diverse populations. So, in a nutshell, cultural competency is a set of skills that you develop to be able to effectively treat individuals that are in your care. And so those individuals, oftentimes when we think of cultural competency, we think of race or ethnicity, we think of spiritual beliefs or cultural beliefs, but being a member of the LGBTQ community is also a part of culturally competent care, excuse me. So some of the key essentials to cultural competency is valuing diversity, understanding that diversity is very important. There is a huge value of understanding that we have diverse populations of individuals that we care for. So understanding that individuals that come to us, they're not always going to align with maybe our spiritual beliefs or our race or ethnicity, our sexual orientation. And so understanding that there is a huge value in diversity, self-assessment, being able to assess yourself and say, okay, I know that this individual is coming to me for care. This is our first session. So let me take a step back before I engage them in their session, their upcoming session, and assess my thoughts and my beliefs around them being a member of the LGBTQ community. How do I feel about that particular community? Because oftentimes, even though we may know, subconsciously be like, oh yeah, I'm accepting of that particular community. And I'm okay with that. I'm not against it. I don't have any ill feeling toward the LGBTQ plus community. However, when someone comes to you for care and they're a member of that community, they're going to talk about certain things that you may never have had a conversation with someone about, such as their sexual partners or their issues with role expectancy within their relationship, the coming out process. So doing a self-assessment about the LGBTQ community before you engage that person in their first session. Developed adaptations to service delivery. So oftentimes, because we live in a heteronormative society, right? We treat everyone with the same service delivery. However, when someone comes to you and they identify as the LGBTQ plus community, you are going to have to adapt some of those things. Again, one of the biggest things that I realized is the um roles within the relationship, right? So oftentimes in heterosexual relationships, there are gender norms, right? So the male is the protector, or the male is the one who takes care of the finances if you have a traditional belief system. However, when you have a member of the LGBTQ plus community, that goes out of the window, because you have two individuals that are the same, that identify as the same gender. So you can't say, oh, so which one of you is the protector? Which one of you is responsible for the finances? Which one of you takes out the trash all the time, right? Because it's not the same. So you have to really adapt a lot of things when it comes to your service delivery. And I I remember when I was in my grad school program, and just a little bit of self-disclosure, I do identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I was in my grad school program, and one of my professors, we were talking about human development in that particular program, in this particular course, excuse me. And he started talking about gender roles within relationships. And then he asked a question along the lines of, I wonder how lesbians do this. I wonder what it's like for lesbians. And I unmuted and I said, well, they don't necessarily have gender roles. I said, I know in my relationship, we don't have gender roles. And so everything is kind of equal. And he said, so no, nobody is the man of the relationship and then the woman of the relationship. And so I had to, as a student, right, I had to say, well, that's kind of inappropriate to say. You don't know if that's offensive. I said, it's not offensive to me. However, you never know who else in this particular class is a member of the LGBTQ community, and that could be offensive to them, because neither one of us identify as male, which is why we're in a lesbian relationship. And so those are some of the things that as providers we have to be mindful of. And that goes back to that self-assessment and understanding and manage dynamic differences within service delivery as well. Karen, can I get a time check, please?
It's 10:34.
Okay, okay, just making sure. So, culturally competent practice. So, treatment content adaptations modify the cultural relevancy of an intervention's curriculum and material. So, oftentimes as clinicians, and I'm speaking as a clinician, but even with individuals that might be case managers, that might be probation officers, that may be psychiatrists, that may be qualified mental health professionals like mental health skill builders or intensive in-home counselors. Sometimes we use different curriculum, right? My favorite website is therapistaid.com. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I love Therapist Aid. I love psychotherapy.net, right? So I go and I look for some of those things, and I also have some books that I use, like DBT books and CBT books and ACT books, right? And so they have curriculum and they have worksheets and that can guide us. But a lot of those things, we have to modify them when we want to use them for members of the LGBTQ plus community. And modifying them doesn't have to take a rocket science. It's not as if you have to go look at the sheet and say, nope, I'm gonna take this out and I'm gonna reword this, I'm gonna write this over, or I'm going to use this as a guide and create my own curriculum, because that's taking away from your service delivery. You just look at it and you say, you know what, I can just change a few words here and there in this particular curriculum to make sure that it's adapted to the client that I am servicing today. And honestly, if we think about it, we should be doing that anyway with all of our clients because, excuse me, every single client is different. They may have the same diagnoses, but all of them are different. So their symptomology is different, how they present is different, their baseline is different. And so adapting that curriculum is something that we are probably already doing, and we may not recognize it. If I'm talking too fast, please just let me know. Karen, if somebody in the chat says I'm talking too fast, just let me know. And
They have not.
okay, okay. So some examples. So use relevant metaphors. So use metaphors that are relevant to the LGBTQ plus community. Use relevant stories. Now, when you use the story, now, number one, we know we use self-disclosure as last means. That's number one. Number two, relevant stories doesn't necessarily mean, okay, you know what, I'm going to tell them a story, but I'm going to add a little bit of zhuzh in there so they get it. If you don't have a relevant story, you don't have to necessarily use a relevant story. Life circumstances. Utilize life circumstances for you that have happened to you, but also you can utilize life circumstances from individuals that you are close to, or you can use life circumstances from shows or movies or books that you read and they were members of the LGBTQ plus community. And values. So some structural adaptations. Add adjunctive components that make treatment more culturally sensitive to clients' daily lives and struggles. So some of those examples: incorporate case management, right? So again, members of the LGBTQ plus community, they have a very high rate of homelessness, of unemployment or underemployment. And so incorporate case management to help them with their daily functioning, right? To help them with some of those struggles, because as treatment providers, we know that if they come to us, and let's say they come to us for therapy, right? And we know that they're struggling with depression, with severe levels of major depression. But a part of that depression is because they're homeless. A part of that depression is because they have no finances. A part of that depression, or it contributes to that depression are different things that a case manager can help them um, resolve. I'll say it that way. And so they're going to come and they're depressed about many other things. But the first thing on their mind is, I can't focus on what I really want to focus on in therapy because, baby, I'm homeless. I'm hungry. I don't have a job. I'm trying to find a job. I can't find a job. I don't know where I'm going to shower. I don't know when my next meal is going to be. I don't know if I'm going to be safe. So incorporating case management to help them with those basic needs before you can get to the kind of meat and potatoes of why they're in therapy. So involvement of the client's chosen family. So, and chosen family is that's the operative, chosen is the operative word in that statement because we have our families of origin that we were born into, but we also have individuals that are our chosen family. Like I have, I have my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister, and they're my family. But I also have a chosen family, people that I consider my siblings. I consider them, I'm closer to them than I am to my family of origin. And their family of origin may be their chosen family. So that may be the only family that they have. So involving their family in their care as well. But when it comes to therapy, it's important to want to ask the client if it's okay to involve their family in their care, and reminding the client, like, I know that you want them to come to this next session, but just remember there are certain things that I will not discuss with them because of confidentiality reasons. And also making sure that the client understands the purpose of their family being a part of that next session. But let's say that you are a case manager, right? Having their family of origin or their chosen family a part of their care is very important because that is their support system. That is who they're going to lean on. One of the things that I utilize in therapy is an eco map. I do an eco map with almost all of my clients because I like for them to be able to see these are the people that I can lean on. Because if I ask a client, like, who's your support system? Oh, I don't have a support system, right? That's not always, that's the number one answer that I receive. And then we do that eco map. And I say, okay, well, who do you lean on for this? Who do you lean on for that? Who do you feel most comfortable talking to? Who is the safest person that you can talk to? And then we do that eco map. And then that's when they're able to see, oh, I do have a support system. I never really thought of it this way. I never really broke it down this way. And so allowing them to see who their support system is, who their family is, and involving those individuals in their care. And and that eco map is not just, relatives. It can be their therapist, it can be their psychiatrist, it can be their case manager, it can be their mental health skill builder, it can be their probation officer, it can be a teacher from elementary school, it can be a coworker or a supervisor. It can be many different people because on the eco map, we're not just looking for relatives, we're looking for everybody. So also using appropriate language terms. So making sure that you use terms that are not offensive. So it's okay to ask, how do you identify? It's okay to ask that question to anybody that you are caring for. Excuse me. Treatment delivery. Accommodate. I need to take a sip of coffee, y'all. I'm sorry. Whew. Accommodate external environment demands. Oh, sorry. So examples, offer treatment in more accessible areas. So there is this nonprofit organization, the LGBTQ Life Center. They have one in Norfolk. And I actually just found out that they are building one in the Newport News Hampton area as well. So offering treatment in more accessible areas. So a more accessible area would be in a community center, right? Or it could be an LGBTQ life center. It could be offering them transportation resources. That's the next one. So help, and that doesn't mean that you have to take them to their appointments, right? But helping them schedule Medicaid transportation, helping them identify uh, how to get to the office that you are seeing them out of. And another great thing that, because COVID didn't give us a lot, but COVID did give us telehealth. We'll say it that way. So telehealth services, I'm reminding them, you know what? We can have therapy via telehealth. All you do, I'll send you a link. You can hop on your therapy session and we can do it that way instead of them feeling like, oh, I don't have a way to get to your office and, feeling down about not being able to receive the care that they are looking for. Reminding them, we're gonna accommodate this, honey. We're gonna do this via Zoom. And excuse me, and then that's going back to incorporating case management. And we're gonna do this via Zoom this time. And then, let's see about some wraparound services that we can offer you or that someone can offer you to help you get to your appointment the next time. Excuse me. So, match with the therapeutic relationship. Research has shown that clients prefer matches with their therapist. These matches include ethnic matches, religion or spirituality, sexual orientation, or gender. I want you to put down in the chat if you have ever had a client that said, I prefer a female therapist. I prefer a female case manager. I prefer a male. I prefer somebody that's Caucasian. I prefer somebody that's African American. I prefer somebody that is Native American. I want you to put that in the chat for me because I know I have heard it at least every single time I had a new client.
Yes,
Every
people wrote many times, multiple times, all the time.
Yes, absolutely. So that match with the therapeutic relationship is extremely important to the care of the client because we can oftentimes they're going to say, you know what, you can relate to the struggles that I experience, that I've experienced. If I come to you and I identify as female and my therapist is male, he may not understand why I didn't come to session today because I had cramps because of my cycle. Or I prefer someone that identifies as lesbian. Now, I don't know how they're gonna do that because are you gonna put it in your bio that, yep, I'm a lesbian, come to me for therapy? I don't know how you're gonna do that. However, oftentimes clients will ask for someone that they can closely relate to. So, provider behavior. This is a very big one. When I was creating this training, I was looking at, I was doing a lot of research. I was reading a lot of articles, and a lot of the articles that I read talked a lot about provider behavior when it comes to service delivery for culturally competent care. Literature shows it is important for therapists to account for cultural factors in the therapeutic relationship. Excuse me. Examples, different perspectives on worldviews and ways of expressing distress. And so provider behavior is it basically talks about, if I come to therapy today and I talk to my therapist about, you know what, my partner and we haven't had sex in 6 months. And the provider just skips right on over that, just disregards that because, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to talk to my client about them and their same-sex partner having sex, right? And so the provider just skips right on over it or acts like the client didn't even say it. Or a big one, nonverbal communication cues, body language, facial expressions, mannerisms. Excuse me. So not a lot, all of these things are very important to culturally competent practice. And that goes back to that self-assessment again, because we're gonna have clients that come to us and they're gonna want to talk about real life things that everybody experiences. Everybody goes through these things, yet it's different because, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to talk to my client about them using different things when it comes to their partner or their sex life being boring and how to spice their sex life up, because this is something that I've never talked about before. So I might shy away from that thing, or that conversation or that topic. So that goes right back to that self-assessment. And self-assessment is important to do throughout the continuity of care, excuse me. So, time check. So it is 10:50. So what I would like to do before we get into cultural humility, excuse me, I want you all to put down in the chat for me, and Karen, I just want you to read them off to me. I want you all to put down in the chat for me, some of the struggles that you've had with caring for members of the LGBTQ plus community. What are some of the things that you struggled with the most? Some of the things that you were like, I'm going to have to seek some supervision about this because I've never dealt with it before. And I gotta say, y'all know those little what's those things called? I don't know. What is this thing called? The the cup warmer that you can sit your coffee cup on and keep it warm.
Uh-huh.
Lifesaver. Lifesaver. Because if
Uh,
not, it would be absolutely disgusting.
pronouns. Looking for providers who provide particular kinds of treatment options, specifically DBT. Not understanding the verbiage. Fear of using offensive language or appearing ignorant. Another comment about pronouns. Discussing same-sex relationships.
So
That may be it.
we're going to get into pronouns a little bit later, but the one thing that I always say when I've done a culturally competent training before, when in doubt, they it out, honey. If you don't know what their pronouns are and you don't want to be offensive, they. And again, it is okay to ask. I've had many clients tell me I would prefer that someone ask instead of assuming, even if they were not members of the LGBTQ plus community, because I would rather for you to ask me the question, and then I know. I had a client tell me one time, at least I know what type of therapist you are if you ask me what I would like to be called. And that's just not with pronouns. Like some clients, when they come, they're like, yeah, that's my legal name, but I would prefer to be called by my nickname, or I would prefer to be called a short version of my legal name, right? So it's kind of the same concept. What do you prefer to be called? What are your pronouns? It's okay to ask those particular questions. And if you don't know, just day it out until you ask. And that's okay. What was another one, Karen?
Being the same about pronouns, being consistent with using the correct pronouns. And a comment you had was they're working with a 13-year-old transgender client whose parents did not want their child to identify as the opposite sex and who refused to refer to their child by their preferred name.
The parent refused.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Is it family therapy? Because we have to remember, and I hope that I do not sound crass when I say this. So please forgive me if I do. The parent is not my client. Okay. If my client tells me I identify as male and my name is Billy Bob, I'm going to refer to my client as male and Billy Bob in those sessions, because the parent is not necessarily my client. I'm building that therapeutic rapport with my client. And if I accept, or if I go with what the parent says just because they're the parent, then I'm not going to get anywhere with that particular client. I'm not going to get anywhere with them. They're not going to open up to me. They're not going to get what they need to out of therapy with me. They're going to be closed off because they just going to do the same thing my parents do. So why am I here? And then they're going to stop coming, right? I'm going to go with what my client has requested. So it's Billy Bob. Hey, Billy Bob, how you doing today? How was your week? How was school? And then later on in services, we can ask Billy Bob when they're ready for their parents to come in and kind of have that discussion with them. But
The
Billy,
return comment was it wasn't family therapy, but it was interfering with the relationship between the mother and child. It was impacting the behaviors of the child and per the client, causing them to feel suicidal.
mm. And finding the right time to bring the parents into session is important when it comes to that particular situation. Talking to the client about that, kind of processing with the client about their suicidal thoughts, providing them with some healthy alternative coping mechanisms for those negative thoughts that they're having. And once you have the client to a point where they're able to manage those depressive symptoms, or they're able to manage or alleviate those suicidal thoughts or ideations rather, then say, okay, are you ready to have mom or dad or parent come into the session and kind of talk about this? And when the parent comes in, one, remind them of the purpose of the session again, and two, start something that I do, if I know that it's necessary, lay down some ground rules. Have everybody pick a rule for that particular therapy session. Mom gets to pick a rule, client gets to pick a rule, and then the clinician gets to pick a rule about respect, about anything that any rule that you want, so that one, everyone is heard, everyone is validated, and then we can get to what it is that we need to talk about. But that's something that is going to happen over several sessions. And so maybe family therapy would be good for that particular client. I don't know if you want to be the family therapist because the client is your client. But maybe family therapy would be something that's good, that would be good for that particular family.
There
Anything,
was, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
I was about to ask if there was anything else, Karen.
There was, yes. Sarah Hickey wrote, I did not have a struggle with treating clients. However, I did see clients in transition and pre-transition who talked very openly about their experience with polyamorous relationships. I stayed curious with my clients, treated them with dignity and respect as any client with a relationship concern or conflict.
Okay. Did you struggle with them being in a polyamorous relationship because it differs from your particular beliefs?
Sarah, if you want to unmute and you can.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, no, your question was just like, did you have difficulty with clients? But I wasn't having difficulty with them. I actually learned so much about those particular relationship conflicts and things like that from my clients. So no, I wouldn't say it was difficult because my views differed, because my views differ from everybody. We all have different views and things like that. So, and they came to me not to really align against me with any different views. I don't really see it like that. I just saw it as just a wonderful experience to be curious and learn from an individual that is unique and had different multiple problems. So I'm glad that I was able to experience that and help them through. And I think it just helped just to stay curious and open and be non-judgmental. And, they appreciate that because they got a lot of that from their own family members who were very religious. So there was a lot of layers to it, but
It sounds
so.
like
Mhm. Yeah.
a question that I ask myself often, well, some questions that I ask myself often when treating clients is, one, what does this bring up for me? So if my client talks about a certain thing and I notice that it triggers a certain emotional response, or it provokes certain thoughts, what is this bringing up for me? Why is this bringing this up for me? And then also, if a client comes and they're talking about something that, like, using Sarah's example, for example, polyamory, right? You know what? This is something I've never dealt with before. So let me really think about how I feel about this, or what are my views on this, because I've never been in a space where polyamory was something that I had to really give thought into. But also something that I ask is, what are my views on this? And am I open to learning about it? Am I open to challenging the views that I have if they differ from my client? Am I open to learning more about this? Am I open to changing what I think about this particular community? Those are some questions that I normally ask myself if there is a cultural difference between myself and the individuals that I am providing care for. So it's 11 o'clock, and I want us to take a quick little break so you can use the bathroom, get some water, get a snack, whatever it is that you need to do. And how long are we going to do the break for, Karen?
Just 5 minutes, because this training ends at 12. So if everybody could be back at 11:06 at this point, because it's 11:01, then we'll resume the training.
All righty. We're going to just hop right on back into it. So what is cultural humility? So cultural humility and cultural competence are two different things. So cultural humility is personal, lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, excuse me, but one starts with an examination of her or his own beliefs and cultural identities. So, in a nutshell, cultural humility is a commitment that us as providers, we take to evaluating ourselves and critiquing ourselves to learn about someone else's culture, someone else's lifestyle. But the key part about that is we start with examining our own beliefs and our own identities. So some of the key essentials to cultural humility is openness, self-reflection, empathy and compassion, and acknowledgement of power imbalances. So self-reflection, y'all heard me talk about self-assessment so many times in this training because it is very important. And so self-reflection, self-assessment, all of that. Okay, we're going to do all of those things to make sure that we are culturally competent and we exhibit cultural humility in the care that we provide to our clients and their families as well. That empathy and compassion, that is something that we learn when we are going through our educational programs anyway. And one of the biggest things is what? Unconditional positive regard. We have heard that term so many times. And that speaks to the empathy and compassion that we are to exhibit or display when we are caring for our clients. And then acknowledgement of power imbalances. Let me say it again. Acknowledgement of power imbalances. So we all heard about, we know the term client-centered care, right? So making sure that we understand that when we are caring for or providing a service to our clients already think that there is a power imbalance. Oh, this is the professional. They know more than I do. This is the professional. This is my therapist. She knows me better than I do. I tell my clients all the time Nobody knows you better than yourself. And I also tell my clients all the time to advocate for yourself. So if you go, let's say you go to a medical professional, if you go to one of your medical appointments, right? And your doctor is telling you about the medication and the side effects of the medicine. They're giving you the knowledge that they have, the general knowledge that they have. What they cannot do, though, is tell you how that medicine is going to affect you, what side effects you are going to experience, because you know you better than anybody. And so acknowledge that there is a power imbalance. Let your clients know, hey, listen, I understand that you may feel that there's an imbalance because I'm the professional. But I want you to remember that we're on the same level here. It's not an imbalance like this. We're on the same level. And actually, there are going to be times in care where the imbalance is going to be this way because you know you better than me. And then there's going to be an imbalance where I'm pointing out things to you, or I'm helping you utilize self-awareness about things that I see from you sitting in this chair as your therapist. But it doesn't mean that I'm better than you. It doesn't mean that I have power over you. It just means, you know what? I see these things, so I'm going to tell you about these things that I see, and we're going to come right back here and we're going to balance. Oops. Excuse me. So this is a video about cultural humility and cultural competence. So I want to play this video, I think. I thought it would play. Let's see. Let me know if you all can see and hear this video, please.
So far, we can see it.
Okay.
With cultural humility,
Yes.
the goal is to lower your own sense of self-importance, to be open to receive other people and other people's way of life, to be present, to be listening, to be open, to see. We are all equals and we each have skills to share. You're talking about developing a partnership. I have something to give, and you have something to give. And what are we going to create from that? It's not coming in as if you have all the answers because you're at the university. And I have none of the answers because I am from a minority community. You have to be relaxed, you have to be humble, you have to come not to a lower level, but to a level that people can understand what you're saying, can understand that you want to be there. Body language. Body language is such a big thing. If you're not comfortable, then you need to go into a community with people that are comfortable so you can see how they act, what type of clothes they wear, how they speak to people. Whether you're a professor, whether you're a student or a staff person or whatever your station is, there may be this kind of sense, within our egos that we need to approach communities that we're working with a sense of knowing everything, of being the teacher. And in cultural humility, it's okay to not know, and it's okay to ask a question. It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It just means that you may not know something. So I think it's just important to approach folks who may have different social identities in that way, with a sense of openness, a sense of listening and really seeing, listening to understand instead of listening to talk and teach. And occupying the space of being a true learner. I think that's simple. Please remember that we are all equals and we each have skills to share. So even though we may not have all of the book knowledge that a university student has, we still have a lot of knowledge and skills, and we're still moving forward. And we need assistance with moving forward. And there's probably a lot the university students could learn from us too.
You know what? All I had to do was click the thing. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, um, scenario two. We're going to do another scenario. Christina has been in therapy with you for 6 months. During the most recent session, you conducted a check-in regarding her satisfaction with therapy. Christina expressed a concern from a previous session. She stated, I really enjoy you as my therapist. There was only one time I felt you invalidated my feelings about my parents not accepting me as a lesbian. How would you respond to Christina? So I want you to put down in the chat some of the ways that you would respond to Christina if she brought this concern up to you during one of those check-in sessions. And Karen, if you could just read off some of the answers for me.
Sure. I think people are thinking about what they would say.
Okay. So while you all are thinking and typing in the chat, if you'd like to unmute, that's fine. But Karen, I do want to ask you, tell me how you would respond to Christina in this situation.
Oh, well, now we have some answers. So
Okay.
I'm going to defer to your
Okay.
trainings here. Okay. So I would ask when that time was and process it with her. Somebody wrote, "Oh, really? I apologize. Let's discuss it." Acknowledging her feelings, accept responsibility, ask clarifying questions to understand and apologize. Apologize and take ownership. Ask what it was that made her feel that way so it can be corrected as needed. Thank you for her honesty for sharing that. Ask if she could elaborate and apologize for that situation. I'd express that's never the intent and appreciate her honesty to share that with me.
Okay. I like those. So in this particular scenario, one of the things that I really want to point out is how Christina felt comfortable enough as your client to tell you when she felt uncomfortable. And so what that exhibits is the fact that Christina acknowledges that there isn't a power imbalance, that Christina feels open enough to say, I didn't like when you said that. Now, I like when you say everything else to me, but I didn't like when you said that. That tells me that one, Christina feels comfortable talking to you about things, even the things that may be uncomfortable to talk about. And it also tells me that you have provided Christina with a safe space in that therapeutic relationship. And you have provided Christina with open communication. And you all have built such a good rapport with one another that both of you can tell each other things. And I like those answers that I like that everyone was like, you know what, I would acknowledge what I did. I would acknowledge and accept her experience with me. And I would talk to her about how we can avoid that. How can I prevent that? What can I do the next time to ensure that that is not your experience again with me? I like those answers that you all have given. Are there any other ones, Karen, that you were looking at?
Yes. Acknowledge and apologize. Ask her to go over the details for correction. Ask her to tell me more about her feelings of invalidation. Listen, validate, reflect, and clarify. Then thank her for trusting our work enough to tell me. And then Tamara wrote, I would immediately check my ego so that it does not lead to transference and express gratitude for her openness while inviting her to share that experience.
I like that one. Check my ego, because even though we are providers, right? If we come in and we're professional, like, you know what, I'm gonna put my therapist hat on today and I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna be a therapist. What sometimes what people forget is that we are still human beings and we still have the same emotional responses as everybody else. So there is a huge possibility that my ego would be hurt. Like, when did I say? What did I say? When? Let me go back. You sure I said that? That's the possibility that that would be our initial thought process, right? So I like that. You said it was tomorrow. Okay. Said that, you know what? I'm gonna check my ego before I move forward with this conversation that I'm going to have. I'm gonna check myself, that we're going back to that self-reflection and that self-assessment. I'm gonna check myself, and then I'm going to engage in the dialogue with my client to make sure that that's not their experience again. You know what? This is okay. Here we go. So some of the biases to be aware of when we are providing care for members of the LGBTQ plus community. Assuming that the client is heterosexual, I'm going to tell y'all a pet peeve of mine. When I hear someone say, "Oh, you don't look gay." What does gay look like? Help me understand. Oh, you don't look like you're a lesbian. What does a lesbian look like? Tell me right now. Give me an example. And if you say, "Oh, they dress masculine." So just because they dress masculine means that they're lesbian. Because now we're getting into some more biases, right? So assuming that a client is heterosexual, that is an important bias to be aware of. Believing that same-sex orientation is sinful or a form of mental illness. Now, a form of mental illness. Now, back a long time ago in the DSM, I can't remember which DSM it was, but there was a diagnosis that a mental illness diagnosis of same-sex orientation, sexual orientation. And there is still a diagnosis in the DSM-5 and the DSM-5 TR for gender dysphoria. But that is different from being transgender. Okay. Next, focusing on sexual orientation when it is irrelevant. Listen, okay. Just because a client informs you that they are a member of the LGBTQ community does not automatically say, "I'm coming to therapy because I'm a member of the LGBTQ community." Every problem that I have is because I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm bisexual, or I'm queer questioning, or I'm pansexual, or I'm asexual. It does not mean that. So focusing on sexual orientation when it is irrelevant is something very important to be aware of. Lacking understanding of identity development in lesbian women and gay men. So lacking understanding of their identity development means that you haven't done even the slightest bit of, research or anything about how they develop their own identity as a lesbian woman or as a gay man. Excuse me. Viewing homosexuality solely as a sexual activity. I basically viewing homosexuality as, oh, you just like to engage in sexual intercourse with someone of the same sex. That's it. And you're not intimate with that person. You don't have an organic connection with that person. Your relationship is solely just because you like to have sexual intercourse with someone of the same sex. That is a bias to be aware of. Identifying with LGBTQ plus clients. And over identifying is you say, "Oh, yep, I dealt with that before. Oh, yep, you know what? I know exactly what you mean." Nobody, even if somebody was not a member of the LGBTQ community, they don't want to hear you say that all the time. Okay, do not over-identify with them, because what it's going to do is going to cause a rift in the therapeutic relationship or the client-provider relationship. offering excessive displays of acceptance or understanding. So excessive displays could look something like, every time this client comes, you have all of this pride paraphernalia everywhere in your office, just an over excess of it. It's everywhere. And every time they come see you, you got 3 pins on this side and 2 pins on this side and the flag in your hair. And absolutely not. Okay. Don't do it. That's all I'm gonna say. Just don't do it. Misunderstanding or underestimating the importance of intimate relationships for LGBTQ plus individuals. So that can be in conjunction with number 5, right? So misunderstanding or underestimating the importance of those intimate relationships. Intimacy is not just about the physical attraction or the sexual intercourse, the sexual attraction that you have with someone. Individuals that are in same-sex relationships, their intimate relationships are just as important. So I want everyone to be very cognizant of that. Presuming that LGBTQ plus couples struggle more with parenting than heterosexual couples. It's the same struggle. All of us are struggling. Okay? Everybody. That's all I can say. So
You did have one comment about that 3, 5, and 8
okay.
seem to play on different edges of our biases.
Okay. Whoever put that in the chat, can you unmute and expound on that for me? They
Michael.
said 3, 5, and 8, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I found it interesting that like we don't want to focus on sexual orientation when it's irrelevant, but we also don't want to view homosexuality as just sexual activity. It encompasses more than that. And I guess it's the more than that that sometimes as a heterosexual guy, I sometimes don't know like how far across that that more is. And so I think I might struggle with knowing the line on 3. And then for 8 is sort of like understanding that it's not just a sexual activity, but it includes that as an important or unimportant, depending on the person. And so like the biases could be either, oh, it's super important and every gay person should have a gay lover, or no, it's super unimportant and actually other parts of their identity is important. It just seems like those are kind of 3 parts of identity that it's easy for us as counselors to like stumble into because of our biases. What are some of the ways that you would recommend finding where our LGBTQ clients are in those 3 kind of identity places?
Okay. So I like that question. So one of the things that I like to do and care is when, like for number 3, for example, focusing on it when it's irrelevant, right? So allowing the client to bring it up, right? So let's say that the client is coming and their primary problem has absolutely nothing to do with them being a member of the LGBTQ community. Yet because on their intake form or their assessment, we know that they identify as a member of the LGBTQ community, our mind is going to go automatically to, oh, is it because they're a member of this community? Should I bring this up? Should I not bring this up? So taking that part out. So sometimes it's you know what, I'm going to focus less on the assessment. I'm going to focus less on the intake form. I'm going to focus less on their sexual orientation that they told me about during the initial appointment or assessment. I'm going to focus less on them being a part of a certain race or ethnicity or cultural background or religion or spiritual belief. And I'm literally only going to respond to what it is they're telling me in this moment. Because what they're telling me in this moment is their primary presenting problem. That's how they're defining what their particular problem is. And so focusing on it when it's irrelevant looks like, oh, they're telling me that they're depressed. They're telling me that they're struggling with sleep disturbances. They're struggling with, intrusive thoughts. They're struggling with lack of appetite or over consumption of food or anything like that. Is it because they're a part of this particular community and that's a huge part of their identity? Is it because of that? Take that out of it. Take that part of their identity out of it and say, okay, let's talk about how long have you been experiencing these particular symptoms? Was there a precipitating factor to this? And if they bring up, you know what, all of this happened when I came out to my family and they didn't accept me, then you can put their sexual orientation back into play because they brought it up to you. But if they don't bring it up to you when they're talking to you about the problem for that particular session, then look at their sexual orientation as irrelevant. Did that answer your question, Michael? I hope so. Okay.
You did have one more quick question.
Okay.
Okay. Sarah Hickey wrote, whoa, someone else wrote right below it. What are your thoughts on an agency asking staff to pick up pins to place on their lanyards for Pride Month that had, "This is a safe place," with rainbow colors if they wanted to? And someone else had commented back that they thought it would be awesome and not just limit that to June.
Well, my take on that is, so as an agency, right, you want to ensure that your clients understand that your agency is accepting of everybody, no matter what community they're a part of. But in this particular case, we're talking about the LGBTQ community. However, your agency also does not want to force staff to do something that they're uncomfortable with. And so if your agency says it's mandatory that everybody puts this pin on them, right? It's mandatory that you put that pin on your lanyard, then it could be looked at differently depending on who's viewing it. I think that if the agency says it's mandatory, then the agency is more focused on what I don't want to say it that way. So let me bring it back. Let me.
She said it wasn't mandatory.
Okay. So if it's not mandatory, then it's, you know what? If you want to put your pin there, put your pin there. But I think that if an agency says, yeah, we have these pins, if you want to put them on your lanyard, put them on your lanyard, I think that is absolutely amazing. Because one, it shows that the agency is accepting of their clients and the people that they serve, or the individuals that they service. But it also shows that the agency is accepting of their staff that are members of the LGBTQ community as well, and that they're all celebrated. But if it's not mandatory, you don't have to put it on your lanyard. You can just leave it there. Or if you like, you know what, I do have clients that are members of the LGBTQ community, I'm going to take this pin and I'm just going to make sure that I put it in the office so that they can see that I stand in solidarity with them, that I am an ally for them. If you want to put it on your lanyard, you can put it on your lanyard. Put it on your on a piece of clothing that you have on, to show that, you know what, I support you as your clinician. Now, that also goes back to that self-assessment, like, what is the big deal about a pin? I am servicing clients that are members of the LGBTQ community. Do I still have some sort of bias towards them if I feel that I can't even wear a pin for them for this particular month, right? That goes back to some of that self-assessment. Like, remember I said that self-assessment and reflection is a continuous process. So these are times where you are going to do some more of that assessment, like, oh, have I really thought about and dealt with the bias that I have if I can't put a pin on, even though I have even though I have clients that identify as members of the LGBTQ community? I hope that I answered your question, and I hope that I made sense.
So there were a couple of comments on that. Christopher had written, I think an additional concern could be the confusion of quote unquote, this is a safe space, and someone who is safe space trained. It may be helpful to ensure that those who are wearing the pin have additional training to ensure that clients don't end up opening up to a staff member that may not be as accepting as the pin indicates. And Amy had also commented it could turn some people off because not all people are accepting.
If we are helping professionals, then we have to check our biases at the door before we engage with our clients, no matter who that client is. And so in the helping profession, checking that bias at the door means, am I really a helping professional if I'm unable to set my biases aside to work with this particular individual? Am I upholding the code of ethics of whichever profession I'm a part of if I'm not accepting of all of the of diversity of all of my clients? Because remember, valuing diversity was one of the important things as well. So that valuing diversity includes the LGBTQ community. And so understanding that as a helping professional in this space, I am required to be a safe space for these clients. I hope that I answered that question. So, implications for helping professionals. We're right into the next slide, everyone. Examine your own views regarding heterosexuality and determine their impact on work with LGBTQ plus communities. Self-assessment, self-reflection, everyone. Remembering the principle of unconditional positive regard. Ensure that intake procedures are inclusive and free from heterosexual bias. So the agency that I work for, one of the things on the intake on the client chart is when it comes to gender, the drop down, it does not only say female, male. It has a list that has female, has male, has non-binary, it has transgender male to female, it has transgender, excuse me, female to male. So ensuring that the intake procedures are very inclusive for everyone. And then another thing at the agency that I work with on our EHR is it has the client's name, and then another section in their demographic chart is client's chosen name. So the client is able to tell you, this is my legal name for insurance purposes or billing purposes, but this is what I prefer to be called, so that the provider knows off rip, this is what I'm going to call this particular client. Karen, your eyebrows are raised. Don't assume that presenting problems are necessarily the result of sexual orientation or gender identity. Just like, so something that I do a lot when I have clients that come in and I look at their diagnosis, let's say that their diagnosis is borderline personality disorder. And BPD might, scare a few people. Like, oh, I don't know how to treat this client. This is what they struggle with. They're unmedicated, so I know all of these things. But I always ask myself, how would I treat someone if I knew that they had just major depressive disorder? Why am I so focused on the diagnosis, excuse me, initially versus this is what they've told me their presenting problem is. So I'm going to take the diagnosis out of it for now, just for right now. And I'm going to focus primarily on what they told me their problem is. So it's the same thing when treating individuals of the LGBTQ community. I'm going to take out the fact that I know that their sexual orientation is, or their gender identity is a part of the LGBTQ community. And I'm going to I'm going to say, this is their potential problem. How am I going to treat them? I'm going to take that out until they bring it in and say, you know what, I think all of this started when, like I said to Michael, I think all of this started when I came out, or I think my depression worsened when I accepted the fact that I identify as bisexual. Realize that LGBTQ plus clients have the same problems as their heterosexual counterparts. Not solely because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, or anything else. They have the same problems, and it does not necessarily mean it's because they are a member of the LGBTQ plus community. Assess spiritual and religious needs. So one of the biases to be aware of is this person is a member of the LGBTQ community. They can't be Muslim. They can't identify as Christian. They can't identify as Islamic because that goes against their faith. That is a bias to be aware of. So be sure that if a client expresses their spiritual or religious beliefs or their spiritual or religious needs, it is our job as helping professionals to incorporate that into their care, regardless of their sexual orientation, if that is what they need. Excuse me. Recognize when microaggressions occur. Increase awareness of LGBTQ plus laws and policies. Now, something that I've said in many of the other cultural competency trainings that I've done on this particular slide, I'm not saying go and research every single LGBTQ plus law and policy and read the whole entire thing, top to bottom. What I am saying is increase your awareness of those particular laws and policies. And increasing your awareness could be just staying abreast on what new laws or, regulations or policies have just come out. Or, if a client comes to session or comes to a meeting with you and they bring up a particular law or policy and you haven't read up on it, allow them to educate you on what they know about that law or policy. And then maybe the next session, well, in between that session and the next, read up on that law and policy so that you can gain your own understanding of it as well. Just increase your awareness of what these laws and policies and regulations are for this particular community. Transgender clients may need help with certain legal processes, name changes, gender changes, connection to local support groups, locating medical professionals, and etc. So an implication for helping professionals, helping them learn what the process is to change their name, learn how to access the application, learn what the fees are, learn what the process entails to change their name or to change their legal gender. Connect them with local support groups that are, just Googling, what are some local LGBTQ support groups within that client's particular area, helping them identify some of these things, even if it's social media groups, and just tell them, look, hey, if you're on Facebook, just search Facebook for transgender support groups. Helping transgender clients with all of these resources that they have access to. So wait a minute. So this particular slide is all about LGBTQ affirmative therapy. Now, affirmative therapy is relatively new, so there isn't loads and loads of research on the efficacy of affirmative therapy. However, the research is continuing to grow. And affirmative therapy is therapy to help clinicians affirm their LGBTQ plus clients. And so this video is a short video that I wanted us to watch on affirmative therapy? Just an overview of it.
A lot of times it's actually worse coming from our own families. One of the benefits is that, hi, this is Jim Breon, and welcome to my YouTube channel, where we're going to be posting a number of different videos on issues involving mental health, therapy, different types of therapy. And if these are helpful for you, please like and subscribe, and we'll keep you posted on new videos that come up. Today, I'm going to be talking about LGBT affirming therapy, what it is, what that means, why it's important, how people can benefit from it. First of all, LGBT affirming therapy is really all about the therapist as a person, who that person is. And it doesn't mean that they're LGBT friendly. It means that they're LGBT informed, that they actually know something about the community. And the community is a diverse community. So it means that the therapist knows about the L, the G, the B's, and the T's. It means that they're embracing you as a whole person, and it's way beyond just tolerating you. LGBT people, especially in our culture, still experience minority stress. They still experience stigma and ostracization. So the last thing you need when you come into a therapist's office is to worry about whether you're going to be judged, or where you have to censor what you're saying, or have to interpret your experience for the therapist. And the last thing you need is to be shamed or judged by somebody who doesn't really get it. The benefits of LGBT affirming therapy, they're not just benefits for people in the community, but also for people outside the community, heterosexual people, because it makes us question the social assumptions that we make about people. And it looks at how the culture, the patriarchy can be damaging for men, for women, for straight people, for gay people. An LGBT affirming therapist is somebody who's going to be looking at the ways that minority stress affects you, addressing the internalized toxic shame that a lot of LGBT people develop. It looks at how that shame is coming from the culture, and a lot of times it's actually worse coming from our own families. It addresses the fact that people in the community, they internalize a lot of that. So one of the benefits is that it helps to work through that shame, and it also helps people to unlearn a lot of the things that they've learned about being an other in the culture. LGBT affirming therapy addresses questions of power and privilege. It helps people to identify where they need to create healthier relationships with people in the community. And it also helps us look at healthy sexual patterns and what that looks like. Overall, it means that, you know, LGBT people come into therapy for all the same reasons that heterosexual people do: depression, anxiety, fears, phobias, trauma. And it means that when you talk with your therapist, you're free to go deep into any of those issues and not feeling like your sexual identity is going to be a problem. So if you are looking for a therapist who's going to understand your personal experience, and you don't have to worry about being judged or having to explain what you mean to your therapist, by all means, you want to work with an LGBT affirming therapist if that's the community in which you belong. If you're interested in working with me, you can reach me at the numbers that are on the screen. I do a lot of telehealth. So if you're anywhere in California, we can work together through telehealth. When we get back to face-to-face, I'm in Orange County, California, and be glad to talk with you about how we might be able to work together to work through whatever issues are concerning you.
So, 5 components to utilizing an effective affirmative framework. Hey, here we go. General social climate, experiences of discrimination, and stigma consciousness. And then also, internalized homophobia and intersectionality. Additional strategies to increase supportive care. Inclusive healthcare, specialized training. So just like this training, learning all about cultural competent care. Telehealth for therapy. Integrating LGBTQ plus health. Workplace trainings. Public awareness campaigns. Peer support groups. Gender affirming policies. And then this is just some of the terminology broken down. So cisgender is an individual who identifies as the same gender they were assigned at birth. Gender expression, the external display of one's gender through a combination of clothing, grooming, demeanor, social behavior, and other factors. Gender identity, the internal perception of one's gender and how they label themselves. Gender non-conforming, a gender expression descriptor that indicates a non-traditional gender presentation. So a masculine woman or a feminine man. Non-binary, a gender identity which falls outside of the gender binary. So meaning an individual, they don't identify as strictly female or strictly male. FTM is female to male transgender individual. So they were assigned female at birth, however, they identify as male. And then MTF is male to female. So they were assigned male at birth, however, they identify as female. And then the dead name, the name assigned to a transgender individual at birth, but they no longer identify with that particular name. And then their chosen name, the name a transgender individual has assigned to themselves that reflects their identity. Remember, respecting the client's gender identity and chosen name at all times. Building a rapport with the client helps make remembering and using the correct name and pronouns easier. I know that was something that everyone that came through the chat earlier a lot about. So when you build a rapport with them, it makes remembering their pronouns, remembering their correct name a lot easier because you built that relationship with them. You are their safe space. It's okay to acknowledge and apologize when or if you misgender a client. Acknowledge that so that they don't think, oh, she think I didn't hear that. Oh, he think I didn't hear that. Oh, I heard it. Acknowledge it. And then these are just the pronouns explained. And then when in doubt, say it out. So this is the end of our training. I hope that everyone learned something from me today. I hope that this training was very, very helpful. If you have any questions or anything, you can put them in the chat because we still have a few more minutes.
So one question I'd actually missed earlier when we were talking about biases was, what are your thoughts about media influences on these biases?
What are my thoughts on media influences on these particular biases? So one thing we all know, we can't get away from the media, right? It's there. But it's important to, when you see these biases in the media, it's important to understand for yourself whether you agree with those particular biases, especially if you're a helping professional. And so and it goes right back to that self-assessment and reflection. If I agree with these biases, then how am I ensuring that I don't bring this into the care that I'm providing to my particular client? Also something that I tell some of my clients that struggle with internalizations, or they struggle with the media in general, stay off of it. If you see something that comes across your screen and it's something that is negative, and then you realize that you start to internalize it, scroll right past it or stay off, just log off for the rest of the day, because right now that is something that's going to be detrimental to the growth that you're trying to achieve for yourself. Do you have any other questions? Oh, I can stop sharing my screen now, right? There we go.
Were there any questions anybody else had for Nicole? There were a lot of comments that it was an amazing training. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, everyone. If we don't have any more questions, I appreciate you all for joining, for listening to me talk for a little bit. Again, I hope that you all gained something from this training. Karen does have a copy of the training. I hope that you all have learned some new techniques for being culturally competent when it comes to members of the LGBTQ plus community when you do service them, in whatever profession you are in. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nicole. That was very informative. Again, you have a lot of thank you, great trainings, comments coming in. I do want to remind everybody to get a certificate. Please, in the chat, put your first and last name, your email address, and your agency. We do use the agency for data collection. You'll be getting a certificate and also a survey. So please fill the survey out because we do want to hear from you and see what kind of trainings would be the most beneficial for you as members of the CSB and members of the community. And if there's nothing else, we'd like to thank you for attending this Region 5 training, and I hope the rest of you have a good week. And since next week's a holiday, a good 4th of July next week. Thank you so much, everyone.